Thanks so much. It's an absolute honor and privilege to be here with you tonight. I left almost minus 40-degree weather to come to your balmy -4. I think it was -9 with wind chills. So no matter what else happens, this was already a great day for me. So there you go. No, it truly, I've known Arlene, as she said, for 10 years, and it's just been fabulous having this working relationship with her and with Thames Valley. I know that parent engagement has been on your agenda for a long time. I know you've made lots of progress in that regard, and I know how passionate people are here to keep that moving. So I feel privileged to be a part of that, and I look forward to our time together this evening. I've put my contact information there, so if there are things you want to follow up on or talk more about, it's there for you. Also, I've been using Twitter the last couple of years. I think I had mentioned this before when I was here in London. With the graduate students that I work with, we've been talking about the need to have more conversation about parent engagement across Canada, across North America, globally as well. And in our last book, as we were ending that book, and we were sitting together talking about what it's going to take to have parent engagement become integral to all of our work, one of the students had said, it's going to take a gentle revolution. So acknowledging it was going to take a revolution, but wanting it to be a gentle revolution, one done with love, with care, with respect for one another as educators and parents. And so we thought, you know, we've got this fabulous gentle revolution started, the 12 of us. Harder to have a revolution with just 12. So we thought, well, we're going to get a Twitter account, and that's how we're going to move this gentle revolution forward. So join us, be revolutionary. I've got hashtags there. I've got my Twitter account. I've got our Walk Alongside Twitter account too. So feel free to tweet. Make this conversation larger than the group of us tonight, and keep it going as well, please. So I want to begin tonight. I thought maybe a way to begin would be to share a story with you, to share a case study, to give you a really clear example of what parent engagement might look like situated in a school context. And so about a year ago, just over a year ago, I had the privilege of visiting a few sites in the United States to look at what they were doing with parent engagement. One of the places I visited was Sacramento, and they have the parent-teacher home visit program there, which is really the reason why I had gone, looking at the amazing work that they're doing. And while I was there, I learned of Luther Burbank School. And so I'm just going to talk to you about some of the things that they did, prompted by the parent-teacher home visit program, to really begin to work with parents and their community members in new ways. So as you'll see on the screen, Luther Burbank, a secondary school of about 1,700 students, so a fairly large secondary school, and about 96% of their kids minority enrollment. So really a very diverse collection of students, a collective, and 72% economically disadvantaged. So a school with challenges with poverty and contexts of poverty, some of the things associated with that as well. When they began this initiative with parent engagement in the year 2000, they were getting a graduation rate at their school of only 30%. So out of those kids leaving their school, 30% were graduating. They were struggling with things like truancy, with gangs, with violence. Their school community coordinator told me that they had on 2 separate occasions actually a dead body right on the grounds of the school, one on the grounds, one in a hallway. And so you can imagine the kinds of things happening there. Talked a lot about some of the kids in the gangs being more in charge of the school than the staff. And so quite a complex kind of situation there. Also, there was a great disconnect between the school and the communities of parents surrounding that school. Lots of the parents were new to America, many of them perhaps even illegal in the country, many of them not speaking English, and there just was a disconnect. The parents hadn't had success in school, and so there was distrust, mistrust, that barrier. So what was happening was then, the way Alicia described it, was really the parents were being blamed for the problems at the school. The teachers were saying, well, you know, these parents don't care. If they cared, things would be different. Or when they did want to engage with parents, they were saying to parents, come and we'll teach you how to be better parents. We'll do a parenting workshop. We'll do a reading workshop. The kinds of things that have parents leave feeling lesser or unable, being judged by the school. So they began with home visits. That was the approach that they used to get their process started. They worked closely with the parent-teacher home visit program. And they began that year with a summer home visiting program, voluntary. Any staff who wanted to be part of that program were invited to be part of it. Could be teachers, could be other support staff as well, counselors, anyone who was interested. And what they chose to do is make visits in the summer with all of their incoming grade 9 students. When they made those home visits, they found some of the kids hadn't actually even planned to come to school in September. So they had the opportunity to talk to them, to begin to build a relationship, with a family and invite the kids in, assuring them that they cared about the kids, they cared about the families, and they were going to work hard to create success. So that was really what they were wanting. They wanted to know something about the child, know something about the family when school began, and to already have the beginning of a relationship in play. I think one of the really important messages that they shared was when the teachers were saying to parents, I can be a better teacher if I learn from you. You have something to offer me. And so your knowledge, parents, is going to make me a better teacher, and that's why I need you. They then reorganized their school into learning communities. So rather than having students be timetabled into this massive school, maybe seeing a teacher only for one course, they created learning communities that were a bit more intimate. So that idea of a house system or a small school system within the larger school. So you can see the kinds of things, like maybe a focus on law and justice, or maybe one on visual and performing arts. So they based those on interests of the students. Teachers were attached to that learning community. So then I would work with this group. This would be my group. And that would give me the chance to know all of my students and to know their stories. The purpose of that was to build trust and relationships. Teacher to student, teacher, also to family, something that had been missing at Luther Burbank. When school started then in September, they had an open house. So it was a way to follow up with the summer home visit program. They phoned every single family, every single grade 9 family, and personally invited them to attend. And the idea of that agenda, different than what it had been in the past, was rather than the teachers talking to parents, the intention of that agenda was to listen. So we want to hear from you. What are the kinds of things you want us to know about you, your child, your family? And you tell us the kinds of things you want to know from us. What do you want to know about high school or curriculum or what we do here? And then that's what we'll make a point of telling you. That led to something that they call Parent University, and some of you may be familiar with that term if you've done readings of authors from the United States, but it's getting to be more and more of a popular sort of approach. Parent University is that opportunity to offer the sessions that parents ask for, not the ones we think they need, but the kinds of things that they want to learn about in order to be able to support their children. And so that when Parent University started at Luther Burbank, it was mainly, the sessions were mainly hosted by counselors, by the administrators, by teachers at the school. And the kinds of things that parents were wanting to know is, what are the program requirements. What does it take to get your grade 12 graduation? They had questions about the curriculum, some of the things the kids were learning. They wanted to know how to read a transcript. So I get this piece of paper from you. I don't even know what it means. How do I read it? What does it say? Is my child on target to graduate or not? So they were doing sessions like that. Then they brought in other presenters when they felt they didn't have the expertise, things that parents wanted to know more about that maybe they needed to reach out. And then one of the things that I think is super exciting and really made a difference is they began taking students and their families on field trips to visit post-secondary institutions. So colleges, junior colleges, and so on. And they were taking all of the kids, not the ones that were on target to graduate, everybody, right? Those ones were being invited, but they were taking the kids and their parents. And they were visiting colleges, universities. They started locally with ones in Sacramento. They visited other campuses in California, and then they went beyond that. So through partnerships, sponsorships with businesses, they actually flew kids and families to Harvard, to UCLA, to see some of these possibilities. So they began to change the story of who our children are, who our families are, and what's possible for all of you. Because of Parent University, as parents gained knowledge and got more familiar with school language, with school processes, with graduation credit requirements, and so on, they began talking to their kids differently. So before, they were disconnected from the school, couldn't have those kinds of conversations. Now they were saying, how many classes are you taking this semester? And they knew how many their students should have. So they became informed and able to talk differently. They'd say, let me see your transcript. Let's talk about how you're doing. What happened then when the parents became knowledgeable and they started to talk to their kids differently, the kids said, maybe we better go to Parent University too. What are they telling our parents there? So kids and parents started to do Parent University together. And then word got out to families in junior highs and in elementary schools, and they began coming as well. So the community was shifting. The talk about education, learning, schooling was changing. And then finally, the parents said, hey, well, what about classes for us? Could we learn English here? Could I do adult upgrading here? Could I improve my literacy? And so they began offering to all of the parents the kinds of things parents were asking for their own growth and development as well. So classes running at night, classes running on weekends and in holidays and so on for the parents' development. As the kids were approaching their last year of high school, they did a second home visit. So they visited that 400 when they came in, and they did another visit then in about a grade 11 year. Whereas the first one was a relational home visit intended to just connect, know each other, listen, build a relationship, this one was more focused on looking at the child's transcript, talking about their plans for college, helping with tuition waiver forms, and so on. So that's where they were having a much more targeted kind of conversation. I was there in January last year. So when they looked at, so Alicia talked about their graduation rate of 30% in 2000, and then in June 2017, it was 86%. So in that 17-year period, they increased their graduation rate by 56%. They almost tripled it because of that systematic, concentrated kind of work they were doing, parents and teachers together. Here's the thing that I couldn't believe. Alicia said every single child who had graduated that year from Luther Burbank applied for college. Every single one of them. So they had completely changed the culture of that community. And that hopes and dreams became, I can go on to Whether it was a trade, or whether it was a junior college, or whether it was something else, they began to see possibilities for themselves. I was working with a school in Regina, Saskatchewan not very long ago, also a secondary school. We had a hopes and dreams evening. We had a parent evening one night, and we wanted to talk to parents. What are your hopes and dreams for your children? And do you know what one parent said? I just want my kid to get through the week. That's where Luther Burbank was too, right? No possibility of a future. But then they began to see that. So those are the kinds of things that I think can happen when we really put our energy, our effort into this kind of work, when we have a plan, when we're systematic about it, when we're committed to it. When we take up that stance that I can do my job better with your help as a parent. And I mean, we have a room full of amazing parents in this room with knowledge, with commitment, with passion for their children and for our school system. So if we harness that, these are the kinds of things that I think we can do. Just before I go on and do more talking, I want you to have a time to talk about that Luther Burbank example as well. Just do a bit of processing of that. Take a couple minutes individually. It's just something I call a 3-2-1. There's paper and pencils on your table. 3 things you found significant, perhaps, in that example, maybe that resonated, that struck you, that you thought, that's interesting. 2, maybe wonders or questions about that example, and something you see as maybe actionable. What's a practice of possibility, perhaps, that could come out of work like this? All right? So do a little bit of jotting. When you've got some thoughts down, then talk in your table group about those things, please, the 3-2-1. Thank you. Have you had enough talk time to feel like you could do some sharing with the large group? All right, Dawn has a microphone, Louise has a microphone. If you'd like to share a comment with the whole group, something that came up really interesting at your table group, it gives us all a flavor for the conversation that you're having in the room. So raise that hand up in the air so Dawn can see you if you'd like to share. Thank you.
If somebody doesn't put their hand up, maybe I could invite them. Oh, there we go.
I have one here.
Hi. One thing that came up at our table was we've got a lot of home and school representatives here, and we really enjoyed the fact that the teachers and staff were taking initiative to approach the parents and families, because it seems like it's God bless our teachers and our staff because they've got their hands full, but we're trying our best as parents to engage others, but you're just button heads sometimes, right? So that was our takeaway point, one big point.
Thank you.
Our takeaway over here, do I have to stand up or can I stand? Okay, I'll stand up. Our takeaway was the reframing of the wording, so telling parents that we're going to learn from them versus telling them what to do was really powerful.
Thanks for that. Really good point. It's about respect, right? Recognizing that we both have knowledge to share. Thank you.
Hi there. So one thing that we talked about at our table was just about around some of the points that you had made around our school language and how important it is for us to understand that parents need to understand what we're talking about and how important it is for them to understand our school language.
Yeah, and there's a reciprocity there too. How can we speak in ways that make sense to parents? So I think we have work to do, those of us in the room who are educators, to think about. We were talking about that in one of the schools I'm working with. What does meeting expectations mean? Right? If you're a parent, what does that mean? And so how do we do a good job of that? And then how do we ensure that we're giving them an opportunity to use that language that we use? Because it gives them an entry into a whole new world as well. So yeah, great point. Thank you. One more. Thanks.
Hi. I'd like to say I thought it was incredible how you also helped improve the parents, not just the students that are going to be our next generation. And some parents feel that if they're not as good at reading or being able to help their children, if they can't successfully do that, why would they go to a meeting to help improve more things? So if we improve the positive impacts and the stability of our parents, it will fall down onto our children and hopefully keep growing.
That's a wonderful point. The research is really clear on that. The stronger the parents, the stronger the kids, right? It just makes sense. So you're right. It's a piece that's very worthy of our attention. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. I hope that got some conversation going, some thinking about some of these things. In Saskatchewan, our achievement results are flat. So we have great schools with good teachers working really hard, and yet we're not making much of a change in our achievement results. They're going up a point, down a point, shifting little bits, but really our overall picture isn't very different. Right now in Saskatchewan, our Indigenous kids are graduating on time, graduation at a rate of about 42%. Right? 58% of our kids, Indigenous kids, are not graduating on time. And so we have real issues. We have things we have to address. If we keep doing the same things we're doing now, we'll never get the kinds of results that Luther Burbank got. It's time for us to do something different. I looked at your results briefly, and it's just a scan. I know that. I looked at the EQAO results that were posted on your Thames Valley website, and your story's kind of similar. You're going up a point or two, you're going down a point or two. You're kind of staying the same in lots of ways. So I looked at the 3, 6, 9, I think is how yours is broken down. So same story. If you keep doing what you're currently doing now, those are the results you're going to continue to get year after year. And just like in Saskatchewan, I know you have great schools, great educators, great things happening. We just have to change something. Steve Constantino is a researcher in this area. He has a book out in 2016 called Engage Every Family. And right in the first page or two of that book, he says if we as educators could successfully teach all children by ourselves, it seems to me we would have done it already. So here we are, all of us educators working so hard, and we're not moving the needle very much. Parents, we need you to do it with us. We need to interrupt that story that school is about teachers and kids in those buildings. We need to look at those communities of untapped resources that surround every single school in your board and say, when we tap the resources of our parents, our families, our community members, what difference might that make to how well we're doing with our kids? It's going to take change. What kind of change will it take? We all have to take responsibility. Every one of us in the room has a part to play, whether we're an educator, a principal, a senior administrator, a parent. Regardless of your role, each one of us can make this change happen. And one of the things we do is we stop looking outward and we move to looking inward. When we look outward, say I'm a teacher in a school, I can say, like they were at Luther Burbank, if only these parents would. If only these parents wouldn't. Why can't they just put their kids to bed on time? Right? Those kinds of things. We put the blame somewhere else. We move it away from ourselves. Sometimes as parents, we say, darn government. And actually, you have lots of reason to say that, perhaps, but different story, right? But we say we need more money for education. If only we had more educational assistants in our school. If we didn't have so many newcomers, right? We can always find a reason that we're not doing as well as we'd like to that's moved away from us. What we need to do instead is look inward. How do we look inward at ourselves and say, what's one thing I can do? What's something I can take charge of? We know that the only person in this world that we can change is ourselves. We have no influence in any of those other spheres in the same way, not directly. And so how are we going to look at our own beliefs, our assumptions, our judgments, our biases, and say, what are the things that we believe in? What are the things we want for our kids? What are the things that we can do? It's important because the research is really definitive about this. Parent engagement is one of the strongest predictors of student success in school, but also in life. The more engaged we are as parents, the better our children do. The research breaks down in different areas. We have school effectiveness literature, we have high-performing schools literature, and so on. And in each body of literature, they'll identify those 5, those 7, those 9 characteristics that build that kind of effective school. Parent engagement is always in that list. Parent engagement is always in that list. And yet when we look at curricular reform or other school improvement efforts, the things that we've often targeted our time and money to have been other things, not parent engagement. So that's why this is the change that I think that could move that needle, that could take that line and have it move upward, just like we saw with Luther Burbank. Karen Mapp says we have 50 years of research in this field. 50 years, 5 decades. So this isn't a whim, this isn't a passing fad. There's solid research to support that when parents are engaged with their children's learning and their teaching, kids do better, they like school more, and they stay in school longer. It's kind of the big stuff, isn't it? Right? We want them to be there and get that graduation. We want them to like it. We want them to do as well as they can. And we could bring out lots and lots of studies. I could stack a big pile here that show influence on grade 3 reading rates, influence on graduation rates, influence on attendance, influence on behavior, influence on social skills, their sense of self-worth, all that kind of stuff. There's research in all of those ways. Students taking more challenging classes, students finishing on time. So we know we've got the research evidence to support this work that we're going to engage in. So what is it I'm talking about? I thought we should maybe have a common definition. Some of you have heard me speak before and you know what this definition is, but I thought so that throughout Thames Valley you have that common kind of definition that you're working with. To me, parent engagement is the authentic and meaningful place and voice of parents in their children's teaching, learning, and development. The big words there are authentic and meaningful, right? So think about that. What does authentic mean? What's authentic engagement? What's meaningful engagement? I always pick on you secondary folks. When I go to my son's, when I did go, to my son's 5-minute parent-teacher conference, authentic? Meaningful? No, neither of those things. So how do we stop doing those things and do something else instead that is authentic and meaningful? Luther Burbank chose to make it home visits. You may choose to make it something else. How do we create opportunities through our systems and our structures to have that authentic and meaningful relationship? In 5 minutes, I sit with you. I say, I'm Debbie, I'm Cohen's mom. You say hello, and you take up your mark sheet, right? You tell me how my son is done, what he's missed, what he needs to hand in, and so on, and we leave. I don't have an opportunity to tell you what I know about my son or share any of my knowledge. So when we're getting to that place of engagement, we're wanting to have it be reciprocal, knowledge moving into directions. So just to put it in perspective, use these terms. To me, there's a bit of a continuum, and it's a sliding scale. It isn't like it just moves in one direction. It can move backward and forward. What our schools are often good at is providing information to parents, right? This is a Facebook page for a school that I'm working with. We share information with you as parents. We tell you things. And that's a good thing. We need information. Information gives us power. It gives us the opportunity later to engage. So that's a good thing. What we have to pay attention to is information is hierarchical. It moves from the school to homes in the community with no interaction typically, right? It's just that move of information. So good, but not enough. When we get to the place of involvement, that's when we're asking parents to be aides, to be organizers, to be fundraisers, to be spectators or audience members at their kids' events, right? So it makes a school a better place, helps us build relationships with one another, enables us to do things we wouldn't be able to do otherwise, but involvement doesn't impact our kids' outcomes. That's really important for us to know. Right? I always call it warm body activity. I'm still in charge as a teacher. I've set the agenda, and now I've asked you to help me get it done. You aren't part of the decision making. You're not needing to share your knowledge. You're just my assistant in that moment. Come on the field trip with me. Would you man the bake sale? Those kinds of things. So we're asking parents to serve the school's or the teacher's agenda when we're involving them. So good, as I said, in lots of ways, but doesn't change that needle. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about engagement. When we get to the place of engagement, that's when parent knowledge comes in. We're asking parents to share what they know, to lay that alongside what teachers know, to start to make decisions together, to start to co-construct or co-plan things together, to come to the table as equals. Different knowledge, different experiences, one not replacing the other, but just complementing, setting them side by side. So when we break down that word engagement, the N means to make. Gauge a pledge. We're making a pledge to one another. So engagement is a moral commitment. Very different than will you help me with the bake sale, right? So here, when we get to engagement, we're talking about real relationship with people that both have mutual respect and something to bring to the table. In the picture that you see on the screen, that's Momina, one of the moms at the school, and she's in the pre-K classroom. And you can see, I don't know if you can tell for sure, she's holding Lego blocks, and she's teaching the kids the Bangla word that goes with the English word. So she's teaching them their colors in Bangla. She's bringing her parent knowledge, her experience into that classroom as a facilitator of learning. And we can go beyond engagement too, to even leadership. Sometimes within a community, it's the parents that have more expertise than we do as teachers. And so they are in that position then to take the lead. What Max Dupree back in the 80s called roving leadership. Leadership falling to the person or persons most able to lead at any point in time. This is a friend of mine, Vernon Linklater. I met him when I was doing research at Princess Alexandra School. And that particular school is about 97% Indigenous. But the staff was 97% white. And so the parents, through their school council, said, we'd really love to have more cultural responsiveness, more Cree ways of knowing in the school. Teachers were open to it but didn't know how. And so the parents said, could we plan a PD day for you? And so they planned a PD. They took the teachers on a bus to a reserve near the city. They had them meet with elders and talk with them about traditions and protocols, an Indigenous view of the child, an Indigenous view of the family. They participated in a sweat lodge ceremony. And then over soup and bannock, they talked about that experience that they'd had and said, so how will this change how you know us, how you work with us, how you think about our kids? So an example of parent leadership. They were the people best versed in that moment. So if you think about that in relation to your own schools, where are you on that continuum? Perfectly, you would have all things happening all of the time, right? There'd be opportunities for all of that. So a question to ask yourself. It's this kind of a model. I talked about that hierarchy where the school decides and lets us know. What we're doing is we're turning that on its side, that sense of engagement, those two cogs intersecting, connecting, one feeding into the other. If one cog isn't moving, it's much, much more difficult for the other one to move as well, right? So how do we have parents contributing alongside teachers contributing to enhance opportunities for our kids? The other thing about parent engagement is we have to recognize that a lot of parent engagement doesn't happen in school. It happens in homes, in communities, in cultural places. That when parents are talking with their kids about what's on the news, playing a game, cooking, building the deck at the back of the house, working on the farm. All those kinds of things are parent engagement. William James says that when parents create what he calls an educationally oriented ambiance, so a sense in a home, I want you to do well. Learning matters. What's happening at school? What do you want to be when you grow up? Talking to kids about how they learn. Wow, you're so good with your hands. That kind of thing is all going to promote their academic achievement and their attainment of other outcomes. When you take them places, do things with them. Maybe visit a museum, maybe go on a holiday, maybe walk along the river. All those things are part of parent engagement. And so what's important is that we who are teachers know what are all the things that are going on in homes so that we can bring that into the school and maximize that, so we can reinforce it and build from it. So this is a piece we often don't pay much attention to. And of course, we want parent engagement on the school landscape as well. So parents are learning with and from the teachers. They're learning with and from the kids. They're contributing to that learning environment at school. Like Momina, they're bringing their culture, their language into the teaching context. In this picture, this is Scott Collegiate in Regina, and the commercial cooking teacher had teacher parents a recipe day. So the kids had been working on different recipes, and they invited their parents in, and the kids were leading, and they were teaching the parents a recipe and some techniques that they had learned. So again, we often say, oh, secondary kids don't want their parents at school, but if it's in the right context, they're thrilled. Look at that mom in the bottom. Can you see her? Maybe it's not showing there. That giving her kid a kiss picture, right? Like she's having a ball there. We can have that kind of fun with our kids at school. Imagine how much they can talk about at home. Imagine how it might change how they cook at home even as well. So we want the parent engagement moving back and forth in both of those places. Everyone, as I said, learning from one another. So just to summarize that then, parent engagement happens at home and at school. In Saskatchewan, we have 950 mandated hours that teachers have contact time with kids. When you calculate that over the course of a year, kids are only in school 17% of a year. So parents, guess who does the big work? You have them for 83. right? So if we aren't engaging with kids off the school landscape, look at the opportunity we're missing. So when I say we have this community of untapped resources, that's what I'm talking about. All of those conscious things that you're doing with your kids that can fill in that 83% and make a difference in that way. It's only parent engagement if it's focused on teaching and learning, right? So if it's that cookie sale or that book fair or that some of those other things that we do as we go and cheer on our kids or we check and say, did you get your homework done? Some of those pieces aren't the ones that are making the difference. So again, we have to say, is what I'm doing engagement in teaching and learning, again, in order to have the impact that we want. Parent engagement, differently than involvement, uses parent knowledge. Arlene said, my kids are grown now. I have 3 young men in my family. They can do all of those kinds of things I talked about for involvement. They could work in the canteen. They could sell books at the book fair. They could bake cookies for the bake sale. They could take kids on a field trip. But they have no parent knowledge. None of them are parents yet. They'd just be warm bodies helping you out. Engagement is when you bring what you know about children, about teaching, and about learning into the context that we're talking about. So ask yourself, is it drawing on parent knowledge? And that's a good way for you to know whether it's involvement or engagement. And we want to engage parents, not as teachers, right? How many of you hate homework time, science fair projects, grade 8 math, right? Because you aren't a teacher in those areas. I wanted to, honestly, when my kids were in school, pick science fair time when you invite me to come to Thames Valley to speak. I wanted to get the heck out of town during science fair time. I hated it. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't know how to help my kids, and they always wanted to light something up or blow something up. And it was like, oh, get me through this, right? But even with stuff I could do, the kindergarten backpacks, my 2 youngest are twins. We'd get our kindergarten backpacks with the book, good books, nice literature. But then there'd be this laminated card that would say, well, after you've read the book with your child, have them draw a picture of the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, does that sound like a parent activity to you? That's a teacher activity, right? Good stuff. Teachers, you do it. That's what we pay you for. That's what you know how to do. I wanted my little guys to sit on my knee and snuggle with me, and we just wanted to have fun reading that story, right? We just wanted to love the story and have that time. For some of our parents, when we ask them to help with homework, you were saying that earlier when you were talking, we make them feel lesser. We make them feel unable. We make them feel inadequate. And we push that gap wider between ourselves and school, right? So we want parents to be parents. That's what they know how to do. That's what they signed up for. And we want teachers to be teachers because that's what you know how to do and that's what you signed up for. And then there's not as much tears and yelling at night in London, right? But we just really need to honor its parent engagement, not parents pretending to be teachers' engagement. So something, again, for us to think about. Because often people's image of parent engagement goes right to helping with homework, right? That kind of thing. We want to honor parents' hopes and dreams. While we're meeting our curriculum outcomes, we can also honor parents' hopes and dreams. I introduced you to Vernon a little bit ago, an Indigenous man, and he said, I want my kids to be proud they're brown. I want my kids to grow up with a strong sense of their identity. I don't want them to apologize to anybody for being First Nations. I don't want them to feel like they don't have the same chances in life because they're First Nations or somehow that they're not as good. I want them to be proud of who they are. So if I'm teaching one of Vernon's boys, I can work towards his hopes and dreams at the same time that I do my other work. I can be very conscious of cultural teachings, of pride and identity, of building that sense of identity. So it's important that we know what those hopes and dreams are so we can achieve them as well. We want to invite shared decision making, right? What are the decisions that educators might make that affect my child's life, our family's life, my life? So for example, how about we co-construct homework policies? Instead of you telling me what that homework policy is going to be and what I might have to do with my son at night. What if we talk about it? So here we are, we're the grade 5 parents, and we say, do we believe in homework? What kind of homework do we want if we do? How much? How often? Is it going to be for marks or just if someone didn't get something finished? All of those kinds of things could be co-decided. Things that teachers and schools have typically done don't have to be done that way. My son, Cohen, guess what? He's a little bit verbal. Wonder where he got that from. He was in, I think, about grade 10 English. And Cohen, because I teach at a university and we've got lots of graduate students around the house and stuff, often he went into his grade 10 English class at the beginning of the year. The teacher gave them the syllabus, the outline. These are books that you'll be reading. These are stories and poems, etc., that we're going to be looking at this year. So Cohen says, this looks like a pretty white, male-dominant reading list, don't you think? So he said, later when I learned this story, he said, his teacher just sort of paused for a moment and said, yeah, I guess it is. And then just kept on going. Wouldn't that have been a wonderful time for him to call me and to say, talk to me about your son. Talk to me about this notion. What's his background knowledge? What does he read at home? What do you read together? How do you talk about reading? Imagine what Cohen's reading list could have looked like in that year if we'd had the opportunity to talk about that together. And not that difficult, right? But drawing on my parent knowledge, filling in some of the gaps maybe in terms of how he knew my son. And then the last piece that I think we want to hold on to is that parent engagement needs to benefit everyone. It's like any relationship. If somebody isn't getting their needs met, it's not really a relationship. So when we look at parent engagement, is it good for the students? Is it good for the parents? And is it good for the teachers? It has to be good for all three in order for it to work. It's not sustainable otherwise. All three parties in this endeavor have to be getting their needs met. I grew up on a farm in northern Alberta. I milked a cow as a kid. I had my little milking stool. That little milking stool you pull over beside the cow, some of you are nodding. It had 3 legs. That stool wasn't going to stand on one and it wasn't going to stand on 2. All 3 legs to hold up that stool. That's what we always have to think about. This isn't having parents replace teachers or challenge teachers. This isn't teachers shutting parents out. It's saying we need each other to complete this circle. And so we're going to do this work together. So lots of talking from me. I'm going to stop there again for a minute. I want you to spend some time at your table saying, what are the things that we're currently doing at our school or in our context that would fall under that definition of parent involvement? Jot down a few ideas. What are some of the things that we're doing that we believe are authentic and meaningful parent engagement? And jot those down. And then I'm going to touch bases with you and see what you noticed, what came up out of that conversation. I love the sound of this room. This is wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to interrupt you there, please. I'm going to send Dawn and Louise with their microphones to hear some of your thoughts. All right, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. Someone to share, please. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, you can run, but you cannot hide.
Sure, we're happy to share an idea. We actually talked about an extension of an activity that we did last week. We had a parent council run a career fair at our school. So we were talking about how to have our parents more authentically involved and enhance the curriculum delivery that we've got. So I used an example of one of the fathers that we were talking about doing current biologists doing current research in terms of antibiotics on foods, really cutting edge stuff and making those connections to be able to have that parent and all of our parents that were there work more closely with our teachers to help improve that experience.
Yes, thank you for that. Again, those untapped resources that exist in our communities. Other comments, thoughts that came up as you looked at where are our parent involvement activities? What are our parent engagement activities? What did you discover? Thank you, Louise.
Hi. As a parent, one thing that I really enjoyed sporadically throughout my children in school is when they were asked at the very beginning of the year, the teacher would ask the parent to write a page, a half a page, anything about their kid. And one year I had the parent say, if you want to write 10 pages, go nuts. And that gave them a really good background of the kid before the year even started.
I love that. Exactly. Asking the parents to introduce their child to us. Beautiful.
So we talked about one of the things that we tried this past year in terms of trying to get grade 8 parents more aware of what the high school experience could be like, and we're talking about how we could tweak that, getting the idea of parent engagement to front instead of just parent involvement. So we're talking about even having activities where you go to the food lab in the foods room and together you can make a dish, 5 minutes or less, it's healthy, do it with the parents, teach the parents how to do it with the kids. Or you take them to the gym and have the kids teach the parents something that they've done cardio-wise, fitness-wise, right? Just breaking it off into different sections as opposed to having it directed from the stage down to the audience. Get them more involved and get them more thoroughly engaged.
Yeah, thanks. There's different ways we can do some of those things we've typically done, isn't it? To give more opportunity for kids and parents to come alongside one another and alongside us. When you looked at your parent involvement list and you looked at your parent engagement list, what did you notice? Anything come through there? Any patterns? Sorry? Yeah. Typically, when we really take a look at what we're doing, most of the things fall in that column of parent involvement. A fewer number fall in the area of parent engagement. We have been good at volunteering in schools as parents, of supporting our kids' learning in those ways. And like I said earlier, all of that is good stuff. And it helps us build trust and relationships with teachers. But we need to cross that line. We need to push it further. We need to learn ways to move it into engagement if we're going to have the impact that we want. This comes from the United States Department of Education, and it looks at, on the left-hand side, things we do in schools that tend to be lower impact. And then as you move across, things that are higher impact. So that's something we really want to start paying attention to. Fundraising is a low-impact activity. It doesn't influence our outcomes. But something like parents working together with teachers on a learning program, that's higher impact. Home visits move into that higher impact area. So that's the kind of thing we really want to ask ourselves, what are we getting for the effort we're expending? So in Saskatchewan with our collective agreement, I shouldn't even say Saskatchewan, but in Saskatoon with our collective agreement, teachers can do lunch supervision and get paid or get time in lieu for that through their contract, right? How much benefit in terms of student achievement is there for teachers to supervise lunch? What's your guess? None or low. But what if we're going to acknowledge teacher time, and we should? What if instead teachers could earn salary or time in lieu for home visits, or for parent-teacher book or for parent-child book clubs, or for homework strategy clubs, or so on? That's a teacher example, right? But where are we putting our time and our effort, and are we getting out of it what we want? How do we take something like a Meet the Teacher night in September and make it a Meet the Family night instead? We've already committed that time, but what if we change the focus? What if we use it to learn about our families? And then we can draw on that knowledge in our curriculum planning for the rest of the year, the rest of the semester. Sometimes we can just shift something a little bit and make it much more powerful. What I want to do now is share just a few examples. I've tried to pick some elementary, some secondary, and some school-wide ones to just give you a sense of ways to move into higher impact activities, possibilities. So this is the work of a teacher named Kirsten Kobolak. She's a grade 1 teacher. She teaches in a fairly culturally diverse community in Saskatoon. And with her grade 1s, she was doing a math unit, and she called her math theme, Math Lives Everywhere. And so she talked to the kids about looking around their homes and finding things that had math in them, in their home, in their culture, in their home, and so on. And she communicated with parents and asked for them to think about those kinds of things as well. So then kids brought in things like patterned fabrics from cultural clothing. They brought in games they played at home. They brought in maybe number lines from another culture, and so on. So here's Kirsten wrote a learning story about her cultural math bins. So she said, a note was emailed and sent home explaining our project and how important the combination of language and culture is in children's learning. We asked for game ideas, artifacts with patterns, number lines in different languages, and more. We really weren't sure what we were going to get when we posed the question. So in the picture that you see on the screen, there's a father who's sharing a game from his Yoruba tribe in Nigeria, a game called Ayo, which is an estimating game. And so his son Laddie brought the game to school and was trying to show all the kids how to play it, and they were having some trouble with it. It was different from what they knew. So Laddie's dad came in and taught the game to the kids. So as all of these items came into the classroom, the kids sorted them into math bins. These are all about patterns. These are all about number. These are all about problem solving. And they sorted the games according to the outcomes in the math curriculum, and then they used the artifacts, the things from their own lives, from their own families, as their math materials for their learning. So it's that simple sometimes, just asking the questions, giving parents the opportunity to bring those items or send those items, and then as they do, having the parents come into the classroom in order to go deeper with those items. Kirsten said they had a grandma come in and teach Cat's Cradle. Anybody old enough to have played Cat's Cradle when you were a kid, besides me? The string game. So they talked about math and what was happening with that kind of thing. And the grandma came in and played the game with the kids. It was something new for them. So again, do you see how home and school just can start to blend together when we know our outcomes, when we know what we want, and we bring those resources from the community? This one I really love. I taught Brett Rowland. He's a high school English teacher. I taught him last summer. He took a class with me on parent engagement at the university. And I asked them to think of a way they could engage parents with curriculum. And as a secondary English teacher, he said, wow, I don't know about this, Deb. I'm not sure what I'm going to come up with. And then he came up with this absolutely brilliant teen parent book club. So here's how he introduced it to his families. This is his letter to parents. My name is Brett Rowland, and I'll be teaching your teen ELA B30 this semester. So that's a grade 11 English class. This summer, I took a course on parent-family engagement at the University of Saskatchewan. As a parent of 2 children in elementary school, I know that even though I often wish to be involved in the events at their school, the times in which those opportunities present themselves rarely fit my work schedule. As a result, it often feels like I have little idea of what a big part of my child's day looks like. I figure if I'm getting tired of my 7-year-old telling me he did nothing in school all day, then you must be beyond frustrated hearing it from a 17-year-old. My summer course had me wonder what you, your child, and I could take part in together as a learning experience that hopefully gives you a better sense of what happens in our school. In return, it may help me have a better sense of the student I work with every day and who his or her family is. So the way he goes on and explains the invitation. So he set up the book clubs. He had 5 choices of novels. He chose novels that obviously aligned with the curriculum in that English class, and also that he felt reflected the families in the community. Then he set up the teen parent novel studies or book clubs for a 6-week block. So in a 5-month semester, he set up a 6-week block at 3 different points in time. He made it voluntary, and he said, I know sometimes you're really busy in the fall because it's football season or whatever. You might want to do it, but it doesn't work, so you could do it later. And so when I last talked to Brett, he'd had the first book club. 7 kids chose to do the novel with their parents instead of just on their own. And at the end of the second cycle, the second 6-week offering, 70% of his kids had done the novel study with their parents. He planned it in a really beautiful way. So there's check-in points along the way. And so I'm going to show you a little video of the first check-in point. So the first check-in point, the parent and the student have to say what book they chose and how they're going to read their book. They had to figure out their own reading schedule. And then the second check-in point, they each would say, the parent and the child each had to say, here's a passage in the book that I think reflects values we hold as a family. And then here's a passage in the book that I think challenges maybe some of the things that we believe or some of our own viewpoints. That kind of thing. They could video it and send it to them if they wanted, or they could write something out or show it in another way. So let me give you a sense of this one.
This is my mother, Curleen Lindo. She reads journal articles and opinion-based articles online. She also reads textbooks for her job. She used to be an avid reader, but not as much anymore because she doesn't have as much time as she used to.
Okay, and this is my son, Jermaine. I am excited to study this novel with him. I haven't been getting a lot of opportunities to do a lot of reading these days, so I'm happy that I get a chance to read. Now, Jermaine does some reading, maybe not novel study, but he does read online articles, specifically sports articles. And he being a guy, I suppose, it's hard to have him sit down and do a lot of reading. So I'm happy for that as well, that this gives us a chance to really spend some time to do actual reading, to study a novel. So this is a great opportunity. We have chosen this novel. For me, I find that it's interesting because it's about the slave trade and being a black person and having slavery being a part of my history. I think it is something that I would enjoy exploring, to know about how other persons experienced slavery. All right? And I think Jermaine chose this as well for some other reason. He'll share.
I personally chose this book because I like the idea of every chapter being a new experience with a different character. And with each chapter, more and more time progresses. So the book is not one specific time in history. It spans over hundreds of years, and that was really interesting to me.
Yeah, when I read this summary as well, and I saw it had multiple perspectives, I found that interesting too. Just reading one book and having so many different perspectives in just this one novel is something that I really want to explore. Right. So we have come up with a calendar, and Jermaine can share with us how we have worked together to determine how we are going to complete the reading of this novel.
So we plan on pretty much reading one chapter every day with some days off. After every day, we're gonna talk about what we read in each chapter to keep us accountable, to make sure that we do not miss any days.
Yeah, so at the end of reading every section, we are going to have a check-in with each other to make sure that we are doing our reading and to make sure that we're at the same point. And so we are going to be discussing what the experiences that we have had reading from that particular section. Yeah, so look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Isn't that wonderful? To me, this is such a lovely example of parent engagement because the teacher's going to do the novel study anyway, right? He didn't have to plan another event, another activity, something over and beyond what he was doing already. He invited parents into the integral work he was doing with kids. Think about the opportunity for these two to do this kind of work together, to have that kind of conversation. This is what Cohen and I needed with his book list, right? This would have been really cool for us to do. I shared this idea with another school, Scott Collegiate. I mentioned earlier that school name. It's a highly indigenous community in a very, very low socioeconomic community in Regina. Literacy is an issue there. And so I talked to the staff about Brett's idea of the Teen Parent Book Club and said, would it be doable in your community? And they were really excited about it as well. And so 2 of the teachers started Teen Parent Book Clubs there. The difference is in terms of choices that they put together for their kids and parents. They used a graphic novel. They used a junior, more of a youth novel than maybe an adult novel. Have any of you heard of the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, Sherman Alexie's book? So there's some graphics in it, and it's written at a much lower reading level, but really has great content, great stuff to talk about. They used audiobooks. So the 2 teachers there chose books that maybe had an audio version or an audio book as an option too. So I think, again, depending on your community, you make it work. No one knows the context better than you as educators. But I think we see this, Brett's community is middle to upper middle class. Scott Collegiate would be our bottom end in terms of literacy and socioeconomic status in Regina. And both of them are really having some fun with it and having some success with it. So kind of exciting in that regard, I think. Here's another one, learning walks. This is something I picked up when I was in Australia. one of the schools that I'm working at in Saskatoon, parents were really wanting to learn more about the math curriculum. Why are they using manipulatives? How come you have to have more than one way to solve a problem, and so on? And so parents were coming in and watching the teacher teach his math class and learning the vocabulary he was using, the strategies, how he prompted students and things, and they were really pumped about it. And then when I went to Australia, they've kind of formalized this process of what they call learning walks. So they might say this is a math learning walk or a science learning walk. It might be a grade 1 learning walk. They focus on what it is we want to see. Parents sign up to come for the learning walk. There's a facilitator. The facilitator kind of sets it up ahead of time and asks some questions about, well, what is it you want to see? What are you hoping to learn in the classroom? The facilitator asks the parents to focus on the kids and what the kids are doing, not the teacher and what the teacher's doing. So this is about watching your child engaging in learning. And so they usually have a designated spot in the classroom. So when they slide into the classroom, so once they've sort of focused, what is it I want to see? What is it I'm looking for? They slide into the classroom. They may only stay 5 minutes, just a very short amount of time, and they watch what the kids are doing. They're giving the parents iPads so they can, again, snap photos of the kids' engagement so they can use that as a prompt for their conversation afterward. So they go into a classroom, they watch the learning, they step out, they might just do a hallway check. So what did you see? What piqued your interest there? They'll go into 2 or 3 classrooms, and then they sit together. The parents show the photos they took. Why did this interest me? What are my questions about this? What do I know now? They talk about how learning's changed from when they were in school to now, or what's changed in curriculum. So again, it's a fairly quick activity. You don't stay in classrooms very long, but really gives pictures that, or gives parents that in-depth picture of what's happening in the classrooms and the chance to talk with a facilitator about it. So that might be a teacher who's been freed up, it might be the principal, someone in the school that can have that kind of conversation with them. So they're really seeing great effect. And again, what happens is then the kind of conversation parents have with their kids at home change completely. I now have the knowledge to have a real conversation with my child. It gives me that entry point into their world, into their learning, and then I can use some of what I'm learning when I do that learning walk at school in my own support of my child at home. I'm picking up strategies, I'm picking up language, I'm picking up possible questions, and so on that I can use. So this is one that they're having great success with right from pre-kindergarten through to grade 12, and it's something parents are loving too. Again, teachers don't have to do anything different than they're already doing. They're going to teach. They do that every day. Parents don't stay for a long time. The focus is on the kids, so the teachers aren't feeling as vulnerable. So it's a really nice, again, when we talk about those benefits, that win-win-win situation. One last one I'll share as I believe a high impact activity is community conversations. These are the kinds of things that you can use in your school council meeting, just a different structure. With our Cree people, we call them talking circles often. So you create that talking circle. Everyone sits in the circle. It goes around the circle. Everybody has a chance to give an opinion, to share some thoughts. No one talks over top of anyone or interrupts or cuts people off. So everyone's equal in that circle and gives, again, a school community an opportunity to talk about some things that might be important. So the intention is that everyone's invited to sit down together and talk, that it's a safe place to share views, no rebuttals, no judgments, that it's intended to be enjoyable. That's one of their criteria. And that they're wanting to focus on things that are valuable and positive about a community. This isn't a gripe session. And again, the idea is to bring forward lots of viewpoints. So no decisions are being made, but it's a chance for parents to share their voice, for teachers to hear that voice, and then to go away and say, what are we going to do with what we learned? How might that impact what our practices are? And then they'll have someone facilitating the conversation. You can see the different circles in this instance, and somebody taking notes so that they don't lose all the good ideas that come forward. So they often do something like just have an icebreaker question, something fun to start, make everybody relax and feel less tense. So if you could invite anybody you wanted for dinner, who would that be? Right? So something fun like that they might do just to begin. And then the kinds of questions that they ask are things like, what is the one thing that you most appreciate about our school? What's one word or phrase that would describe our reputation in this community? What's one action we could take to build a stronger school? What's something that the school could do to support parents in educating their children? What are some of the words that you'd use to describe how would you like to see this school in 2 years' time? Right? So lots of possibilities for questions, and I can share this if people are interested in it. I can share the handout. So again, an opportunity to gather insight from lots of people, invite lots of different perspectives, safe because no one's rebutting or saying, well, that wouldn't work, or I disagree, or whatever. And then having all of this really good information, all this parent voice, parent knowledge as a way to say, well, what are we going to do with what we know now? Or how is this going to influence our plan where we go from here? It can be as simple as using Seesaw. As I moved around, I heard some people are using Seesaw. Again, snapping that photo, taking that little bit of video, sending it home so parents have that window into what's happening in the classroom. Again, another entry point into conversation. Some teachers are finding them parents will send things back and say, hey, we did that sort of experiment at home too, and here's something that happened. So it doesn't always have to be big and huge, right? But how do we build it into the work we're doing naturally? How do we open it up to conversation? How do we ensure we're hearing more and more voices? Those are some of the pieces that we're working toward. So I'm going to give you just a minute again. How might you take something that was on your parent involvement side, tweak it, change it a little bit, and have it become higher impact? So for example, taking a Meet the Teacher night and moving it to be a Meet the Family night. That would be one that moved from lower impact to higher impact. Or what on your parent involvement side might you say, we're just going to throw this out. It isn't worth the effort we're putting into it, and instead we're going to do something on the parent engagement side that's going to give us more bang for our buck. So play with those ideas that I tossed out for you. Do a bit of talking about those. Revisit your own and see what ideas that might have sparked for you, okay? A couple of minutes to do that, everybody. Thanks. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to ask for your attention again, please. I'd love to have a whole day, not just a couple hours. There's so much exciting talk going out there, and I'd love to hear it all. Just want to leave you with a couple of things to move forward. I hope I've planted some seeds. I hope you're leaving with that difference between involvement, engagement, thinking about what you're doing that's low impact, that could be higher impact. Just some pieces to take back and continue conversations with others at your school, whether it's your parent group or whether it's your school staff. Here's what I recommend as some possibilities for you. Go back to your school and do an environmental scan. Have a look around. So walk around the school, walk in and out of every entrance, go up and down those hallways, and say, do I see parent engagement? Do I see a school that's a welcoming, hospitable place? Would all parents in this school community see themselves reflected in what's on the walls, the messaging, and so on? Look at newsletters, Facebook pages, all the ways that you communicate with families. What's the language being used? Is it telling language or is it inviting language? Is it we're deciding and letting you know, or is it come, talk with us and let's decide together? Have a look at all of those pieces. Really take a look as if you're a stranger to your own school. How are school council meetings set up? Who holds power there? Are the parents in that room representative of the diversity of your community? All questions to ask, kind of as a self-assessment moving forward. Determine where your school is on that continuum. Where do you kind of fall mainly? And once you have a sense of that, then what are your next steps going to be? So administrators in the room, what are your next steps? What's yours when you look inward to take on and do something about? Teachers in the room, what about for you? You could be that teacher who says, I'd like all of the parents to write me a letter and tell me about their child. You could be that teacher that says, hey, I'd like to have a learning walk in my room. And parents, what's your first step? What are you going to do to have more parents come, to be sure that your parent body is representative of all of the diversity? If you're not getting invited, how might you be the one who initiates? Maybe you don't get asked to write that letter, but you write it anyway and you send it in. Maybe you find that one teacher who's willing to have a learning walk in his room or her room. So what is within your locus of control when you look inward? So we're not going to wait for someone else to do something. We're each going to do something that's within the realm of our role and our responsibility. This work takes professional development. We can't do what we don't know how to do, right? So if we want parent engagement, we have to learn about it, read about it, have book clubs, have study groups, those kinds of things. Invite people in, go places, do site visits, watch videos, have a quick little article a week, right? We need the professional development. It's like anything. We get better at something the more we know about it. Determine some check-in points. So you go away from tonight, you're excited maybe, but then life goes on, right? It gets busy. So when are we going to talk about this again? The next school council, the next staff meeting, when are we going to do that? When is a check-in point to say, what have we done? How are we doing? Are we moving? Where are we in our journey? And then during those check-in points, say, okay, what's working? What are we celebrating? What are we excited about? What obstacles perhaps have we met and how will we problem solve them? Sometimes this work is hard and there's tension in relationships, and we can't let that stop us. I just had my 40th anniversary last summer. I can tell you there's been lots of tension at points in time. We have gotten mad at each other. But we continue to work at it because we believe in it. We believe in our relationship and we believe in our family. Tension is normal. Don't let it stop you, right? Just the way it is. Work it out, just like you do in other parts of your life, and keep moving. Problem solve, adjust what you're doing, make changes, move on, learn from your mistakes. Yves Bousquet, a principal that I worked with when I started my research at Princess Alexandra, used to say, anything worth doing is worth doing badly at first. So start, do something, try it. You'll learn from that, right? It's all part of the process. So one of the things that I really, really want you to leave with is this notion that parent engagement is not an event. It's not an activity. For me, I see it as a philosophy and a pedagogy. Those are teacher words. It's what we believe. It's what we carry in our hearts about who we want to be with our kids, who we want to be with our kids' teachers, how we want to live together. If I believe in this community that surrounds my school, if I believe parents have capacity, if I believe parents have knowledge to share, if I believe I'm going to do a better job with their knowledge than without it, that's going to shape everything that unfolds in my school. So parent engagement is like a worldview. It's how we live. It's the fabric of who we are. And then it's a pedagogy. It's the approach we take to live what we believe in our actions. Right? So if we believe parents are capable, then parents are part of everything that we're doing in our schools, in our school district, to enrich opportunities for kids. We see it in the pedagogical approach. Just like math, you see manipulatives in a math classroom, you see play in an early years classroom. Those are pedagogical approaches. Just like that with parent engagement, we have to say to ourselves, what's our approach? How are we making this the way we do school in Thames Valley? That's the important part I think we have to think about. This is not just a family event. Okay, it's something way more situated than that. So a quote, if we want to keep more students on the path to success in school and beyond, then it's time for teachers and families to come to the school more frequently, more openly, and on more equal terms. It's time for parents to be invited to engage as full partners in their children's schooling and education. Not just that 5-minute conference where you tell me a couple things. What does it look like if we engage as full partners in teaching and schooling? I really believe that parents and families are key to the success of our kids and our youth. And the research supports that in so many ways. And I want to personalize that for you a little bit as well. Because we can talk statistics, but sometimes we need to talk human beings as well. I taught a little boy very early in my career, and his name was Carl Michael Vidal. As a brand new teacher, I was given an assignment. I'm an elementary teacher, and I had language arts and a special ed major. Those are the two areas that I had a double major in. So when I began my teaching career, I was working with kids who were struggling to learn to read and write. Capable enough kids in lots of instances, but just not catching on to that particular piece. And so often by the time they came to me to be with me in my program, they were frustrated. They'd experienced failure. They had low self-esteem because of some of the experiences they'd had. Their parents were tired of hearing the negatives, and that was the environment that I became a teacher in. Carl Michael, I got to know before I was his teacher, because he was the kid on the playground you thought, oh my God, I hope Carl Michael's absent today. Or please don't make me supervise on the primary end, right? Carl Michael was physical, he was often angry, and he let people know how he felt when things didn't go well. I remember a day, I was taking my class into the gymnasium in our school for a school assembly. Carl Michael was in grade 1, and he was standing there with his teacher at the entrance to the gym, refusing to go in. And I remember hearing him say to his teacher, I am not walking into this gym with those babies. Carl Michael had been repeated the year before. He was in his second year of grade 1. He was a physically pretty big kid, and he was much taller than the other kids. He was feeling, I think, that if I walk into this gym, everyone in the whole school knows I'm really a grade 2 kid, but I'm in this grade 1 classroom. His self-esteem, he's saying, I don't want to go in there, right? I think he had chosen to be bad most of the time so he wouldn't have to be wrong. That was kind of the way that he operated. I think I was half afraid of him at that time, even though he was only 7. But I knew on the playground he was going to be more successful than me at any kind of conflict resolution we were going to engage in. So then he comes into my program. There he is. He's my student now. And I remember days where Carl Michael would erase and erase and erase on his paper till he had a hole in it. I remember that paper being soggy with sweat some days, because if something wasn't just the way he wanted it to be, he couldn't stand it being there and he'd erase it. I remember him shaking with frustration at times as he tried to figure out how to read and how to write. I don't think I knew much about how to help Carl Michael at that point yet, too, as a beginning teacher. So Meet the Teacher night rolls around, and Carl's mom, Ethel, comes to Meet the Teacher night. And it's like, what do you say? I didn't know much about him yet. I certainly hadn't had any success with him yet. And so I was sort of worried about what Ethel and I were going to talk about. So Ethel comes in, she's beautiful, her person, and she sits at the table, and I think out of desperation, I said to her, tell me about Carl Michael. Because I was really not sure what I was going to say. In saying, tell me about Carl Michael, it was probably the best thing I could have ever done. And she told me about Carl Michael. She told about how his dad had left their family to make a new family when she was expecting Carl Michael. She talked about Carl feeling rejected by his father. She told me stories of how repeating grade 1 had affected him. She told me about his older sister. And we talked for a long, long time. And I learned that night how deeply passionate she was about having Carl Michael succeed. How much she loved him was evident. She saw him as capable and competent, and she was just really hoping she could help me see him as capable and competent too. Over that year, and I had Carl Michael for 2 or 3 years, I visited their home a lot. We had tea in their garden. I saw this home. It was a little townhouse near our school, filled with art, filled with books, filled with love, filled with flowers. I saw the interactions in their family. I watched Carl Michael's ski race because he was super athletic and really talented. I saw his art in his home, and I saw how gifted he was as an artist. Because Ethel took the time to spend with me to help me know Carl Michael, I really believe Ethel taught me how to be a teacher. I didn't know as much coming out of my teacher ed program as I would have liked to. Experience is everything. And I really think that over those days, those hours, those moments that we spent together, she was my teacher educator. And it was really important because she was my teacher educator of Carl Michael. Carl, as I said, kind of afraid of him before I taught him. He's the kid you could have liked or not liked as a teacher. And you know what Ethel told me? She taught me, through all of these experiences, she taught me not just how to teach Carl Michael, she taught me how to love Carl Michael, really love him. I teach my parent engagement classes every second summer. I had been at the university all weekend setting up this beautiful environment for our classes because it's kind of an immersion experience. We spend a long time there together, and I want it to be comfortable. I got home on Sunday afternoon. It was late in the afternoon. There was just a little bit of sun left in the yard, and I sort of plunked in a chair in the yard and thought, I'm just going to enjoy this for a minute before I make supper. And I opened Facebook, and I had a friend request from Carl Michael. I haven't seen, heard from, knew nothing about Carl Michael's story since he was in my class. So I would have last seen Carl Michael in 1984, right? And there's this friend request, so I was absolutely thrilled. So of course I accepted his request, and we began this conversation. I want to share with you what Carl Michael wrote, and I want you to think about Ethel when you hear this, because what he wrote was about Ethel. You meet a lot of people in your life. Very few leave a lasting impression. I can think of 5 people that believed in me, inspired me, and pushed me to become the person I am today. I want to thank you for your kindness. You believed in me when others didn't, and I've never forgotten it. But I wouldn't have been on Carl Michael's list without Ethel, right? I went back to school and became a chiropractor. I then decided to continue my education to become a medical doctor. I just started residency at the University of North Dakota in family medicine. If it wasn't for you and the 4 other people in my life, I would not be where I am today. Thank you for looking beneath the surface and finding something special inside. It was there. It just took me a long time to find it. This is what parent engagement does. This is what parent engagement does for kids, and this is what parent engagement does for teachers. That's one of the reasons that I think it is so important. I know Carl Michael would have had his mom #1 on that list. I don't know what other people are on there, but I know that Ethel was that person for Carl Michael throughout his whole school career, and look at where he is now. 100 cases, when we talk stats, when we talk numbers, 100 cases is a statistic. 1 case is a tragedy. I can tell you 42% of our Indigenous kids are graduating on time. That means 58% aren't. Every one of those kids has someone in their life who loves them and sees their lack of graduation as a tragedy. And that's what we have to focus on when we do this work. We aren't talking about numbers. We're talking about our kids. We're talking about our kids' future. We're talking about our families and our friends. And that's why I think this work is so critically important. The price of doing the same old thing is far higher than the price of change. So letting that line be where it is and continuing on is too big a cost. It is going to be uncomfortable to change. It's not always going to be easy. It is going to take some time and effort and learning on all of our parts. And the price of change is worth it. That's what we have to remember. So again, join the gentle revolution. Get out there, talk to people about parent engagement. Be in touch if there's things that you want to talk more with me about. Thank you for your evening. I know time is precious. It's your greatest resource. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share my passion about parent engagement with you, and I hope leave you with some new thoughts and new ideas as well for the work that you're doing with your parent council, with your school, with your own family. So thank you for tonight.